Our first speaker has been involved in progressive politics, see, starting already, since he was a student in the 1970s. Personally endorsed by his Studio City neighbor, actor and environmentalist Ed Begley Jr., Michael McCue was elected to 2 terms on the Studio City Neighborhood Council, served 4 years from 2007 to 2010, and represented over 30,000 constituents. I'm surprised I got past that one. While seated on the SCNC board, he also served on the SCNC Government Affairs Committee, Cultural Affairs Committee, Transportation Committee, and chaired the Environmental Affairs Committee. In 2009, Michael was the Green Party's endorsed candidate for LA City Council CD2 special election, and for many years he has frequently advocated to the Los Angeles City Hall, Sacramento, and Washington, D.C., speaking truth to power on the issues of an independent ratepayer advocate, to oversee the Department of Water and Power, enforcement of leaf blower laws that would drastically reduce CO2 emissions to help to prevent severe climate change, renters' rent stabilization rights, marriage equality for all, publicly funded political campaigns, and an end to the prohibition of marijuana and universal health care and Medicare for all. He has served as a facilitator for the San Fernando Valley Greens, and has just talked me into doing that, so we'll see if that goes. And organized a rally in the Valley for state Green Party candidates in 2010, as well as the President's Day Los Angeles City Council candidates event supporting Measure H that was earlier this year. Michael has recently joined the Move to Ammend board as one of the organization's speakers, advocating a constitutional amendment that would remove the corporate personhood status that resulted from the 2010 Citizens United decision, and that would reverse the Supreme Court's ruling that money equals free speech. Michael, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Please welcome my co-host for the evening, Mr. Michael.
I'm going to keep my remarks very short because I just want to, first of all, thank you all for coming out and try to get everyone to understand what the theme of the evening is. We call it Occupy the Future because we want our Valley voters to be prepared for what is looming on the horizon for us politically. And there are several important issues that are coming down the pike that we should all have a heads up and be aware of. And I believe that these issues are issues that are, I sort of coined a term, that are cross-partisan issues, not non-partisan issues, but issues where we have consensus across the board, no matter what political affiliation you consider yourself to be. For example, I'll use the Move to Ammend as an example, which Jeff was telling you I've recently become involved with and have been going through training as a speaker. When the Citizens United case was decided by the Supreme Court, I think the majority of Americans were not necessarily pleased with the ruling saying that corporations may assert rights before the courts as though they had constitutional rights, as though they were natural persons. A survey was done not too long ago that found that over 60% of Republicans did not agree with that. Over 70% of Democrats do not agree with that decision. And I would venture to guess, even though the Green Party is always left out of these types of polls because of the two-party tyranny that's going on, but I would venture to guess that 99% of the Green Party agrees with that, okay? And I see some occupiers out there, so that's good to see. And I'm going to speak more about Move to Amend just a little bit later in the program, because first I wanted to speak about the California Disclose Act, which is along those lines, because for years, and I want to recognize Robin Wright, who's sitting in the back there. You know, Robin and I have been working with California Clean Money Campaign for a long time, and Robin has really dedicated herself to it. She's a San Fernando Valley Green, and I would like to give her some recognition right now for all the work that she's done. Robin is really wonderful. And one of the things, you know, California Clean Money Campaign, our goal is to have publicly funded elections for all of the campaigns that are going on in California, which would get private money out of the elections. Now, we have to do it sort of in increments. We weren't able to get, the corporations outspent us in 2006, or was that 2008? No, 2006, when we had the what was it, Prop 86, was it, Rhonda? Yeah, 89. Even Bill Clinton came into town to help us with that, I recall. We did the big speech over at UCLA. But they had this ad, this very expensive, well-produced ad that showed a conveyor belt of people being crushed by our proposition, including a poor old lady in a wheelchair, just got crushed and smashed and flattened like a pancake in a Warner Brothers cartoon. And we weren't able to get that through. Had we gotten that through, we would have had publicly funded elections in the state of California. So we've been going there using another tactic. And we've been getting this bit of legislation passed and that passed. And we had a proposal that made it so that we can elect this Secretary of State's office for the state of California to be publicly funded. And someone can run a publicly funded campaign if they so choose. And now, California Clean Money Campaign has the Disclose Act, which has come out of committee in Sacramento at the legislature and is going to be voted on soon. Now, we were hoping to announce tonight, because it was on City Council's agenda, Los Angeles City Council's agenda, to take a vote on it tomorrow, the same day that they're taking a vote on supporting the Move to Amend resolution. And that's one of the reasons that we timed this event for this evening, because we wanted to rally for both of those items, which we feel are very pro-democracy and pro-we the people. However, I'm very sad to announce that City Councilperson Richard Alicorn, has pulled the Disclosure Act from tomorrow's agenda and is taking it back to committee. So there will not be a vote of support on the Disclosure Act at City Council tomorrow. However, I do want you to know just a little bit about it, and then we'll move right on to the next speaker. And just a few things very quickly. It's going to come up in the legislature for its first legislature-wide hearing next year. We think in January, right, Ron? Yeah, so it's just a few weeks away, really. And it's Assembly Bill 1148. This is what we want you to remember, Assembly Bill 1148. And it would apply to all ads that are supporting or opposing ballot propositions. And what it would do basically is in television commercials for these ads, the last 7 seconds or 5 seconds, I think, would require that the largest money contributor be on camera. If it's a corporation, the CEO of that corporation with their name in the cryon at the bottom, and with the association saying, we are supporting this, we are backing this, and I'm putting my name on this, so that we know who is behind these propositions. Every year, Mercury Insurance comes up with a proposition. The one that they had last time, it would have stopped our veterans returning from war from paying the same rent for car insurance, because their insurance would have been interrupted because of their service in Afghanistan or Iraq. And they were trying to make a law that said if your insurance for your car is ever interrupted, that your rates are going to go sky high. And every election cycle, Mercury Insurance comes back with something similar that is always basically a ripoff of the consumer and is wrong. If AB 1148 passes, Mercury Insurance's CEO will have to be on camera and saying that he supports this. This helps the voter to understand who's for, who's against, who's backing what. Do you think Prop 8 would have passed if the Mormon church elders had to be on camera saying we are the ones who are supporting Prop 8? Or if the Pope had to be on camera? So that's basically what it's about. And even more, in your voter information pamphlet that you get, the top 5 contributors, both yes and no, for any proposition, will be listed. So it gives you a much better idea of understanding and knowing who's pulling the strings. You can see my Disclosure Act button. The symbol is it's like a bright flashlight that's shining the light on a pile of money. And that's exactly what it's about. The Disclosure Act is about revealing who's spending the money and which special interests are trying to manipulate our elections and manipulate the Californian voters. Okay? So, in the spirit of Occupy, the Occupy movement, I wanted to just very briefly do a mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
We are going to occupy the future
We're going to occupy the future
at this rally in the Valley. We are going to register to vote. We are going to track our districts. And know which districts we live in. We are going to learn who our assembly rep is. We are going to learn who our state senator is. We are going to support AB 1148. And we are going to sign the petition in support of AB 1148. Otherwise known as the Disclosure Act. We are going to tell our friends about the Disclosure Act. We're going to tell our families about the Disclosure Act. We're going to tell our neighbors about the Disclosure Act. And if we are working, we're going to tell our co-workers about the Disclosure Act. We are going to support the California Clean Money Campaign. We're going to track the assembly vote and learn the date of the upcoming vote. And we're going to call our assembly reps. And tell our friends to call their assembly reps. And tell our family and our co-workers and everyone we know to support the Disclosure Act. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn things back over to Mr. Bacon, my co-host. Please come up, Mr. Bacon. I have something for you, actually. I have a little something for you. No, I'm not going to give you, but I have something for you because, you know, Robin and I used to always work together and partner on putting together special events for the Greens and things. And I miss doing that with Robin very much because she's been so dedicated to the California Clean Money Campaign. And I can't blame her because I support that as well. But we haven't had a chance to work together in a long time. And last time we got an event together, I acknowledged her with a little gift. And I wanted to acknowledge Jeff with a little gift because it's been very pleasurable working with Jeff on this event, putting this together. And it's just a little pin. This is something from the Green Party in Australia. And it's the Greens pin that they use. They use a triangle. And so, Jeff, I'm just going to put this like right in your tie here. And this is a way of saying thank you, Jeff. You're doing a good sport and for working with me on Occupy. And thank you, Jeff, for working with me on Occupy the Future. It's been a pleasure working with you. Thanks.
That was a nice surprise, Michael. Thank you very much. I feel like a prom date. Doesn't expect anything later. Okay. You knew it was coming. Come on. Okay. On to the next speaker. Bill Maxwell is a writer, educator, and environmental activist from North Hills. He has worked with several local nonprofits, including the Red Cross, Valley Green Team, and Cultural Community Services. As a board member of our community school, we help facilitate the acquisition of $9 million in renovation funds to move the award-winning charter school to a permanent campus. He is one of the founders and steering committee members of the Transition San Fernando Valley CBO, an environmental and social organization focusing on resilience and localization. He is now organizing a nonprofit educational institute, Seekers Unlimited, which will offer a dynamic, integrative middle and high school curriculum for 21st century students. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Bill Maxwell.
In 2004, Rob Hopkins, who was a permaculture lecturer, went in front of the students with a very simple but also pretty complex problem. Our entire way of life, our entire civilization, depends on high energy consumption, high carbon output, and a massive impact on the environment. And what he posited to his students is what you do if that goes away. What if oil, which is the foundation for our civilization, is no longer cheap? What if all the things that we've been pumping back into the environment comes to haunt us, causes a climate change, which destabilizes our very foundation? And as students, rather than running away in horror or crying in a corner, came up with a proactive plan to deal with this. They created something called an Energy Descent Action Plan. The idea to take what is currently an unsustainable model and create robust, healthy, localized, resilient communities. And because of the action between Rob Hopkins and these students, they brought it out into the world. They brought it out into Kinsale College, where it started. They brought it out to the town of Totnes in England. And they created the transition movement. This idea that if we wait for a government can be too little too late. But if we try and do it as individuals, that might be too little. But if we all work together, all of us work together, we might be able to get somewhere. We might be able to make this dream a reality. That movement, which started really officially about 2005, 2006, from a small town in England, now has over 1,000 communities across the world, on almost every single continent, barring Antarctica, but we're still trying. We have these transition movements. What to say about what we do? Transition San Fernando Valley is what's called an official hub. It's our job to try and bring this kind of ideal to the valley. We have strategic partnerships with the Valley Interfaith Committee and with the Valley VEDC, Valley Economic Development Center. Right, I'm tripping over that. And we also offer things like services, time exchanges for those services that have been lost in the recession. So I guess the only thing that I really need to see about it is it's about us. It's about us working together for a better dream for the San Fernando Valley. When the founders of Transition came here to train those of us who started the founding of the San Fernando Valley Transition, they took one look at this metropolis and says, we have no idea how you guys are going to make this happen. We built this whole program for a small town in England. But we have full faith that you will make it happen. That you will be able to fix this, be able to put it together, be able to put together a program to transform one of the largest metropolises in the world into something new, something unique. So that's transition. What have I got to offer for this evening for Occupy the Future? I want to put forward 3 things to the assembled people, and maybe if you like it, we'll pass it on. First suggestion. If you want to change the future, we need to start opening up public spaces for dialogue. We need to create spaces 24/7 where people can come meet face to face, be comfortable, talk with one another, because these problems are too complex for just a hierarchy, for just the people on top. We need all sorts of diverse people to talk about this, to trade solutions, to try solutions. Crowdsourcing, what it's typically called, okay, is the wave of the future. Second suggestion. There's a gentleman named Gunter Pauli. He created something called the Blue Economy. The idea is a systems approach to economics, to business. It's this idea that if you see waste anywhere in your business model, you have missed a business opportunity. Because that's not the way the world works. Everything is used. And they're looking right back into the world, and they're pulling out some of the most innovative ideas I've ever seen and presented about. Ideas that literally revolutionize the valley with our basis in micro and mini manufacturing and our history of aeronautics. And the third and final suggestion, because I'll keep it short tonight, invest and empower low-income communities. Because these people, they don't have the time for just ideas. They will point out what ideas will work best and will work right now. They are practical people. There are people, if you invest in them, and you not only create, well, you've stopped problems that will become a problem in the future. You've stopped issues that will cost us a lot more in health insurance, in jail time, and in social services, by stopping it now, by stopping it at source. But you've also given these people a chance to take these ideas, the lofty ideas, and make them something real, something practical. So, 3 simple things. Thank you very much for your time. I've got 2 more family members here. John and Mitzi, can you sit up? 2 more.
Thank you, Bill Maxwell. And transition, San Fernando Valley is something that the Greens are becoming closer and closer with here in the Valley, and I know that we will. I've attended some meetings and I'm going to attend more. And I've got a little plot of land outside the side of the house that I'm going to start planting stuff. You never know. I'm going to get some tomatoes going or something. So now, next I would like to introduce someone who is very special to us because, I've been working, and many people here in this room have been working on marriage equality. It was very upsetting in 2008 to find that Prop 8 had passed by just a little bit, and I believe that the small percentage that it passed by was a group of confused voters, because a lot of people thought that if they were voting yes on Prop 8, that they were voting for marriage equality. It was a very confusing vote, and as you know, it's in the courts, and it's all in a Gordian knot right now. But here to untangle that knot is a wonderful gentleman, Thomas Watson, who is the founder of Love, Honor, Cherish. It's a group that I've been working with and gathering petitions for, and I'm going to let him tell you about it. He's going to give us an update on where we're at with Prop 8 right now, because it's in the courts and there was just a decision the other day. And I would like you to please welcome to the stage Mr. Thomas Watson of Love, Honor, Cherish.
I don't think I've been introduced with music recently, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. My name is Tom Watson, and as Michael said, I'm one of the founders of an organization called Love, Honor, Cherish. And as is obvious by the name, we're actually about marriage, and we speak very specifically and clearly about what matters. We try not to use, I think, the kind of euphemistic language of equality that sounds great until somebody finds out what it's really about. We really want to go directly and talk about the fact that this affects people's lives. And when I think back to my own life, I was first advocating strongly and in the media for same-sex marriage more than 20 years ago. And that is really shocking, because I like to not think of myself as getting older, but it's also more shocking because we've made, in many respects, such slow progress. It is time that we actually, seized the moment and stood up. It is, same-sex marriage is really not a threat to anyone else's marriage. We're not responsible for divorce of most couples. We're not the problem that other folks seem to think we are. And so I think we need to speak clearly towards that. During the Prop 8 campaign, I think we had a lot of trouble speaking clearly and speaking truthfully. The campaign, has been often criticized and was flawed, but I think what we failed to do was communicate directly about the importance of marriage to people's lives. A lot of people don't want to get married. Marriage has some problems, certainly. But it really is about valuing people and valuing choices and commitment. And in our society, and in LA and around the state, a lot of same-sex couples want to get married and don't have the opportunity. And I think it's really important to understand that, yes, there's some states folks can get married. We have 18,000 couples who managed to get married during that short window of time in 2008 between the California Supreme Court's decision legalizing same-sex marriage and Prop 8's passage. But it actually, it has a real significant, I think, devastating effect on people's lives. My own life, I've been with my partner for now 13 years. We've been together 10 years in June of 2008. And the prospect of rushing to get married within 3 months when neither of us had any urgent reason to get married, we wanted to plan a real wedding, we couldn't. And so we didn't get married. It seemed there was no shotgun need for a wedding. And so we waited and instead devoted our energies to fighting Prop 8. And that was our choice, but now we are, more than 3 years later, still cannot get married in California. having been together for more than 13 years. So it is something that's, I think, very personal, and it's also, on a greater level, just a basic injustice that we need to go about solving. Now, I'm a lawyer. I trust that the courts in our society and system should do the right thing. Right? That's what we all think they're there for. We learned this in grade school. We have our tripartite system of government. The courts protect people's rights. They uphold the Constitution. Unfortunately, that is a slow process, number one, and two, a process that isn't necessarily one we can count on. So this is really where we are today. Post Prop 8, there was a court case called Strauss, which was brought before the California Supreme Court saying that voters, simply on an initiative basis, should not be able to take away fundamental rights of a group. The California Supreme Court disagreed. Then the Perry case, which you're probably familiar with, the Boyce-Olson case, was filed, and a judge up in San Francisco found Prop 8 unconstitutional, now about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. That case is up on appeal, and the court case that Michael alluded to, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and here we are getting into very technical issues. The Ninth Circuit said, let's see if the proponents of Prop 8, as opposed to our elected representatives, have the right to defend Prop 8 in court. Governor Brown and Attorney General Harris typically are the ones that defend the state's laws. They are elected representatives. And before that, Schwarzenegger as well. They all declined to defend Prop 8 in court. And so the question that the Ninth Circuit asked the California Supreme Court was, where the elected representatives say, no, we agree that it's unconstitutional, do a small group of citizens in California have the right to defend Prop 8? The California Supreme Court said 2 weeks ago that indeed they do. And so the case is now moving ahead, and there's another hearing this week about this issue, the standing issue is what it's called, about whether people who are not injured by Prop 8, there's no particularized injury to them, have the right to be in court to defend it. And so that is likely to be found that they can defend it. It's likely to be found that they can. And so we will see a ruling on the merits by the Ninth Circuit, most likely, and then ultimately probably the U.S. Supreme Court. My question is when and can we expect the U.S. Supreme Court to do the right thing? Now, people speculate on this. Kennedy will do the right thing. He did the right thing in prior cases. I certainly hope he would. I trust the courts most of the time to do the right thing. And that's our system, and they should. But it's not a certainty. Obviously, we know the courts have made tremendous blunders in the past. It takes them a long time to correct, and they have nationwide impact when things go wrong. So where are we? And where, as a marriage activist, what do I believe we ought to do? I believe we ought to continue to support the court case, of course, but I think that the timing of it is in flux. It might be a couple years, and the outcome is uncertain. So are we going to stand up and try and fight and do what's right? Or are we going to, as someone wrote to me in an email, wouldn't it be an effective use of energy to sit and wait for the court case? My answer to that is simply resounding no. That is not the way to achieve equality. And I think that there's a more esoteric philosophical basis here, which is any willingness to wait for equality, to wait for the world that we want it to be, undermines the importance of what we're fighting for, right? I think that this is certainly true about almost any of the issues we all care about. As soon as you say, I'm okay, I really believe in this, but it's okay if we wait 2 or 3 years until the courts get to it, undermines the importance of it. And so what my group is doing is preparing for a potential initiative if the court case does not resolve itself with couples being allowed to marry in California by the spring. That is a possibility under the current timeline, but if that doesn't happen, we want to take this to the voters in November 2012. We're likely to be starting to gather signatures in about 2 weeks, and we'd certainly like your help and support. It's a group, it's Love, Honor, Cherish. We actually have met more than 120 times since Prop 8. Basically, we meet now every 2 weeks. And I'd love your, like us on Facebook, go to our website, support us. And, I think the earlier speaker said this really well, but talk to your friends, raise this issue. Tell them about, the people that you know that are grieved by this. Talk to them. I think that's what really matters. And we are making societal change, but I think at a much too slow a pace. That I will say thank you very much, and thanks again to the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And we were talking about this being a cross-partisan event. It's interesting that the political parties who have marriage equality in their platform, the Peace and Freedom Party, the Libertarian Party, and the Green Party. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party do not have marriage equality in their platforms. Just a note. Okay, now it is my exactly, thank you, occupiers out there. It is my deep pleasure to introduce to you someone who is a dedicated activist going back decades, an extremely successful actor who has appeared on the television series MASH for over a decade, which was, when they had their finale, it was like, I still think it's in the top 5 of highest rated shows ever on television. Also appeared as a regular on Providence, and maybe he doesn't want me to remind him, but I remember seeing him on Desperate Housewives. I thought he had a really good part on there. But he just kind of went in and out of there because people come and go there so quickly. But Mike Farrell is a successful actor. He's published, is a very successful author. He just recently published a book telling about his life and his involvement with activism, how he got involved in activism, and what makes his conscience work the way that it does. And it's wonderful reading. And right now, for those of you who know him, for years he's been working on the issue of the death penalty. I don't know what the evangelist voters understand, why they don't understand thou shalt not kill, but there seems to be a disconnect, especially if you've been watching the Republican debates, when you hear the audience cry out for the death of people. It's just, there's something going on there that's not quite right. However, it is with great pleasure, and we thank him for coming here tonight, because the SAFE Act is about to be a state proposition, and Mr. Mike Farrell is going to speak to us about the petition that I've been asking you all to sign at the door so that we can get the SAFE Act on the ballot for next year. Mr. Mike Farrell.
Thank you, Michael, for inviting me to be here this evening, and thank you all for your attendance. Yes, for 30 years now, I've been trying to stop the use of the death penalty in this country. And when we started, it was only newly brought back into, for those of you who don't know, the death penalty was held unconstitutional in 1972 in the Furman decision, and reestablished in 1976 by the Supreme Court, with what's known as the Gregg decision, which established certain safeguards in order to protect the rights of the accused. Those safeguards have made the law very complicated and, as it turns out, very expensive. And that fact is not one I used to choose to talk about much, because the issue of money and death and life doesn't seem to me to be the primary one, but it seems to have caught some traction lately. In the last 5 years, 4 states, heretofore death-dealing states, have given up the death penalty. And in significant part, they do so for a couple of reasons, but one is that it costs too much. It's kind of counterintuitive to think that the death penalty costs more than putting someone in prison for the rest of his or her natural life. and maintaining that person. But in fact, it costs well over 3 times as much to kill, to go through the process and kill, as it does to keep somebody in prison for the rest of his or her natural life. So, having made the argument over time in many different ways, in many different contexts, to many different people in many different places, we've come now to the place where California has the largest death penalty in the country. Over 700 men and women are on our death row. We in California reestablished the death penalty in 1978 and then expanded it in 1979 and a couple of times since then to make it one of the most easily accessible to prosecutors death system. With going on 720 people on death row today, since 1979 we have successfully executed 13 people. That, according to a recent study done by Judge Alarcon of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and a law professor by the name of Paul Mitchell at Loyola University, means that since 1979 we have spent $4 billion to keep and maintain and use the death penalty in this state, which, if you break it down, means that we spent over $300 million per execution. Now, the Mitchell-Alarcon study says just to maintain the death system, not necessarily use it, but to maintain it. But we've had a moratorium here in California for the last 6 years. There have been no deaths in California under the death penalty law in California because the federal court judge found our system unacceptable. And until that's resolved, they cannot use the death system. But even though we haven't killed anybody for the last 6 years, we still spend $184 million every year to maintain the system and to maintain the process because our prosecutors here in Los Angeles and in other cities around the state continue to charge death and continue to prosecute death cases and continue to send people to death row. So what we have done is put before, after doing extensive polling and research, we've put together the petition that Michael talked about, the Safe California Act. I hope all of you will sign the petition as registered voters, those of you who are, to put it on the ballot in November of 2012 to replace the death penalty with life in prison without the possibility of parole, thereby saving $184 million every year. According to the studies the ACLU has done, over 5 years we will save $1 billion of taxpayer money by that simple act. We not only will save the $184 billion a year, the act calls for 2 other things. One is that $30 million every year for 3 years will be taken out of the savings and given to the police departments in various areas, specifically targeted to do 2 things. And that is to solve the unsolved 46% of the murders that go unresolved every year and 56% of the rapes that go unresolved every year. Police forces continue to say they don't have the funds in order to do the necessary work to solve those crimes. And we believe spending $100 million out of the savings of $600 million that during those 3 years would be worth doing so that they can do their job. And putting people in prison. We don't say that people shouldn't be punished for crimes when they are guilty. The problem is, this week, a man was released from prison in another state. He now makes the 140th human being who was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death, and in that case spent over 20 years on death row for a crime he didn't commit. He is now the 140th exoneree, as we call it, a person who's been exonerated from death row after having been convicted and sentenced to death and spending sometimes eons on death row. So 140 people, innocent people, have been put through this process. And what we want to do in California is make sure that no more innocent people are captured and tried and convicted and sentenced to death and suffer the fear of being executed by the state when they didn't do the crime. We have released 2 people from California this year, exonerated 2 people who were accused of murder, tried and convicted and sentenced, not to death, but to life in prison without possibility of parole. One because he was 17 at the time of the crime, and the other because, I'm not sure why, he got life without parole rather than death. I think it was the jury that said they weren't satisfied, and the option when you have a capital crime is either death or life without parole under California law. 2 people then have been exonerated and freed because they were ultimately shown to be innocent of the crime. So we have this situation in this country, and particularly in this state with the largest death row in the country, that is bankrupting itself. We are a state with, I'm sure as you know, with a $20 billion budget deficit. We're cutting aid to children, aid to dependent children. We're cutting education. We're cutting police work. We're cutting everywhere we go. When we could save this $184 million a year, every year, by this simple expedient. So what I hope you'll do is sign the petition to get it on the ballot. The polls we've taken suggest that more people are beginning to understand it to the degree that more people now support life in prison without parole as the ultimate sanction than they do the death penalty, which is a significant shift over time. The Troy Davis execution and a number of other facts that have taken place in this arena over recent years have changed people's view. The innocence issue, the execution of somebody like Troy Davis, the continued speaking out, actually, of the people who actually do the executions. I don't know if you saw it during the execution of Troy Davis, but the former warden of that very prison said that he had presided over executions and it was the most ghastly thing he'd ever done. He said, I am guilty of murdering people, some of whom may well have been innocent. What we don't know, when we say we know that 140 people were released from death row, we know they didn't do the crime. What we don't know is how many people that didn't do the crime were in fact part of the 1,200 plus people that have been executed in this country over time, over recent time, what we call the modern era since the Great Decision in 1976. So we are the only Western industrial nation that continues to use the death penalty. We are in the minority in terms of the rest of the world. 160 nations no longer use the death penalty. About 60 continue to use the death penalty. But of those that do, the top 5 include Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, China, and the United States. Not good company to be in this sense. As a former co-chair of Human Rights Watch and the president, currently the president of Death Penalty Focus, I've been dealing with this issue for some time and believe that the right to life is a fundamental right. Even when someone acts out in a manner that is inappropriate and beyond the law, we don't have the right to take that person's life. We can put that person away, sometimes for life without parole, or we can put that person in a prison that actually treats the problems that an individual might have and actually begin to rehabilitate people rather than simply throw them away. But that's a choice for the people to make in terms of public policy. Today, what we're doing makes no sense at all. It makes no sense economically, it makes no sense morally, it makes no sense from a point of public policy. So I would ask you to not only sign the petition, support the Safe California Act, but also talk to your friends about it. Those of you who know people who are politically active, those of you who are involved with issues around this state, please let people know about it, because this is no longer a liberal, conservative, Republican, Democratic, Green Party, etc. Issue. It is an issue of humanity. It's an issue, more conservatives are now coming out and saying, if we don't like the way government functions, how can we give the government the right to kill? If we don't like the way money is expended, how can we justify giving away, throwing away hundreds of millions of dollars every year? And I think people with a more humane perspective say the state simply should not have the right to kill a human being. So there is a marriage going on, a joining of the minds and opinions of people from all walks of life. And I would hope that what you will do is help us put the word out so that people will begin to come together with this notion that we can do better. And one of the ways we can do better in this society, other than the ones we've already heard about tonight, all of which are very deserving, is to value life and value humanity and value ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. As I mentioned earlier, Michael McCue has recently joined To Ammend.org as one of the organization's public speakers, advocating a constitutional amendment that would remove the corporate personhood status that resulted from the 2010 Citizens United decision, and that would reverse the Supreme Court's ruling that money equals free speech. Please join me once again in welcoming Mr. Michael McCue.
I'm going to make this quick, Jeff, because this is, we're running just a little bit late, and I want to make sure that Jill has plenty of time to speak to everybody and speak to you. Yes, I alluded to it before, I've joined Move to Amend, and the announcement for tonight is that I've been sort of given a leadership position in terms of organizing MoveToAmmend.org for the Valley. So anyone who is interested in helping form consensus with all the different bodies, governmental bodies or community groups or chambers of commerce, to help join us form consensus that 1, corporations are not people, and then 2, money does not equal free speech. Both of those rulings by the Supreme Court are wrong. When corporations have constitutional rights, people's rights become meaningless. How can one human being's power to speak compare to a massive corporation's ability to speak? A corporation has millions of dollars, exists in many places at once, can live forever, and employs thousands to do its work around the clock. It controls politicians, the media, and the economy. A human being has little expendable income, lives in one place, dies, and must use her small amount of free time to work for causes she believes in. A human being needs clean air, clean water, food, and love to survive. A corporation does not. A corporation has no mind, no conscience, and no motive but to amass money. A human being thinks, tries to make ethical decisions, and is motivated by obligations to family and community. How can we say that these two dramatically different kinds of persons have an equal voice in a democracy? I don't understand that. The Supreme Court has ruled that money equals free speech. The corollary is this: people who have money can speak, and people who don't can't. This is a plutocracy. That's what we're talking about there, is a plutocracy, not a democracy. To put this power imbalance in perspective, consider this. It took over 1 million individual donors to raise about $750 million for Obama's presidential campaign in 2008. $750 million is approximately 5% of ExxonMobil's third quarter profits in 2008. 5% of Bank of America's profits in 2007. 37.5% of Goldman Sachs' first quarter profits in 2009. 18% of JP Morgan Chase's third quarter profits in 2009. 25% of Ford's profits in 2009. And 5% of Philip Morrison's profits in 2008. Human rights are for humans. A corporation is not a human being. The word corporation does not occur in the Constitution. Corporations had to use unelected, unaccountable judges to give them rights. Corporations exist to serve the public welfare, not for the public to serve them. The Supreme Court has created a Frankenstein scenario in which the people's creations now control the people. A person is a private entity with rights and sovereignty. A corporation is a public entity with obligations and responsibilities. And I want to point out that in the first two sentences of any corporate papers that are filed in Sacramento, it says, legal fiction. A corporation is a legal fiction. Now, I don't know about you, but a fictitious character can't have constitutional rights. The American Revolution, by the way, for those of you who are history buffs, was explicitly anti-corporate. What do you think the Tea Party was about? That was against the West India Tea Company, a corporation which was being given free rein by King George to run roughshod over the colonists. And that demonstration was a demonstration against corporate rule and corporate bullying and unfair corporate abuses. And the revolutionaries made sure, once they had established this nation, that corporations were tightly controlled. For the first 75 years after the revolution, corporations could only exist if they served the public good. They were severely restricted in their activities. They had to be chartered by a vote of the state legislature. They could only exist for a certain number of years. They couldn't own other corporations. Then they could be dissolved once they had earned a certain profit margin. They couldn't donate to political or charitable causes. They had to operate in the state where they were chartered in, and their stockholders were local. They could only do the certain tasks that they were chartered to do, that they were chartered for, and they couldn't own land that was not necessary for carrying out that business. Judge-made law is not democracy. We didn't elect the Supreme Court justices, but they get to decide who does and who doesn't count in our democracy. Congress and the people should decide those issues. The sole purpose of a corporation is to amass profit and consolidate wealth. They are legally required and structurally designed to make money at any cost. This makes them dangerous to people and democracy when they get too big. I want you to understand that I am not an anti-corporate person. I believe that corporations should exist and do well and profit, but under certain guidelines and regulations close to the way it was originally set up in our democracy. The structure of a corporation separates humans from their actions. They do destroy responsibility and hijack our decision-making as we, the people who are in charge of our representatives in Washington. And they make humans do things collectively that they would never do as individuals. Poison water, deny health care, and destroy the planet. Every cause we care about and fight for is affected by this corporate power. And tomorrow is the day. Anyone who wants to help us get city council and convince them, persuade them to pass a resolution supporting MoveToAmmend.org's amendment to the Constitution that clearly states that corporations are not people and that money does not equal free speech, get to City Hall tomorrow morning, okay? Because you can do it. Get to City Hall tomorrow morning, be there sharp at 8:30. You're going to have to wait it up because City Council might give you the runaround. I should know. I've been down there so many times. I know how they operate. But help us make Los Angeles to be the first major city in the United States and really in the world, or I should say the United States because other nations don't allow corporations to have constitutional rights. But the first major city in the United States to adopt MoveToAmmend.org's constitutional amendment. Thank you very much. And now it is my pleasure to introduce someone. I'm very excited about his candidacy. I'm very excited about the candidacies of both the city candidates who are speaking with us tonight. Cary Brazeman has come up through the neighborhood council system, the same way that I did when I ran for Council District 2 in 2009. And it looks like we have a possibility of getting our first neighborhood council person in the city office with Cary. He is not only brilliant, he's a huge success in business. He's been serving on his neighborhood council, it's Mid-Wilshire? No, Mid-City.
Mid-City West.
Mid-City West Neighborhood Council for many years. Cary is also the founder of LA Neighbors United, which is an organization that advocates for accountability and responsibility down at City Hall and has had a major impact in guiding policy. And it was with great pleasure that I introduce to you someone who I'm very proud to call my friend, Cary Brazeman, who is running for city controller.
Sidewalks. People know us lately for speaking out a lot about sidewalks. You know, the city is talking about shifting to property owners, residential and commercial, responsibility for fixing sidewalks even when the tree root damage is due to city trees. And our response back to the city is, you folks have let this problem deteriorate over 20, 25 years. Let's figure out a way to fix the problem, and then we can talk about potentially shifting responsibility to property owners. A lot of folks know us recently because of the sidewalks issue. As Michael said, Cary Brazeman, here to say a few words about accountability and personal responsibility, two of the key values on your party platform. I tell two versions of this story. In one version, a guy walks into a bar. In tonight's version, a guy walks into a bank. And the guy could be any one of us. He's clean, he's neat, he's got some gray in the hair. He spent most of his life working for somebody else. He's been out of work for 12, 18 months. He's helping support his kids who are in college still. His credit rating has suffered a bit. His FICO score, you know, Mr. FICO, we all know FICO, is not where he wants it to be. It's deteriorated a bit in the last 18 months, 2 years, for a variety of reasons. And he's here in the bank today to try and get a loan to get a small business up and going. And for a variety of reasons, including the fact that Mr. FICO isn't real happy with him, he's denied the loan by the bank. And he walks out of the bank, you know, a little humbled, a little dejected, but still neat and clean and has his act together. And we could spend some time talking about how and why and the criteria and the standards by which he was judged by the bank and ultimately denied the loan. That's another conversation for another night. But I'll simply net out of that tonight that in its own way, that's how the system holds us accountable. The question is, how do we hold the system accountable? And then we've spent a fair amount of time tonight talking about that. We do it by occupying the future. We do it by occupying Wall Street and City Hall. We do it by asking questions. We do it by voting. And we do it by blowing the whistle, among other things. Blowing the whistle on waste, on fraud, on abuse, on inefficiency, on criminal activity. That's why I'm running for city controller of the city of Los Angeles, to help hold the system accountable, to help hold our other elected office holders accountable, to help make the system work for us. It's our personal responsibility to do all these things. I know I'm preaching to the choir here tonight and following in the footsteps of the others who essentially said the same thing. Again, by voting, by asking questions, by occupying Wall Street in our backyard here in Los Angeles or in New York, by whistleblowing, by writing letters, by showing up at hearings, like Michael will be doing tomorrow at City Hall. That's how we hold the system accountable and make the system work for us. That's why I'm running for Los Angeles City Controller. Again, it's our personal responsibility. For making the effort yourselves to be here tonight, for asking the questions, for raising the issues, for voting, for blowing the whistle, for occupying Los Angeles. Thank you. You're an inspiration to me, and we shall hold the system accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cary Brazeman. We wish you the best of luck, and I'm sure we're going to be seeing you again before the city election of 2013. And speaking of that city election, we have another very interesting candidate here this evening. This is someone whom you may know from his fame as a radio personality on KRLA, where he's hosted a very popular show that very oftentimes focuses on local city politics. And I want to tell you something about the next speaker. This is someone who is very astute. You cannot pull the wool over this gentleman's eyes. He understands. He's an outsider candidate. He is not from the machine. He is not from within the system. And even though he's not coming up through the neighborhood council system, he understands it. He has befriended it, and he is working very tightly with it to make sure that the neighborhood councils know of his candidacy, know what he stands for. And I think the key value that we appreciate about Kevin James is the value of accountability and personal responsibility, something that the Green Party values very highly and something that Kevin James values very highly. And I want you to give him a warm welcome to the stage. Kevin James.
Bumper music. It's great, you know, when you're in the radio industry, we have bumper music before we come up and speak. Great idea, Michael. Move this over for just a minute. It was, I don't know, a few years ago, and I've been involved in neighborhood councils in varying degrees, never elected to a neighborhood council per se, but it was a candidates forum in Council District 2. And I had not met Michael McCue before. But I was sitting in the audience, and he was talking about, he was answering questions and you know, discussing the issues. And I remember I leaned over to Ron Kay and I said, who is this guy? He has great answers for every question. He knew exactly what the issues were, and he was not afraid to instantly speak truth to power. And there was power on that panel. So it was immediately after that I invited Michael onto my show, and we've since become friends for a whole lot of reasons. And I appreciate, Michael, the work that you all do, the work that is done in this room for our community. And when I talk about city issues, well, it really is, it's a nonpartisan race, and these are nonpartisan, common sense issues. We all want to live in a better city. I'm 48 years old. I came to Los Angeles in 1987 to work at a law firm called Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. I was thrilled to come to Southern California from Oklahoma and went to high school in Texas. And Los Angeles was the land of opportunity then to so many of us. The land of hopes and dreams in a whole nother level that we just didn't seem to have in other parts of the country, it seemed to me. And when you look at the industry, years, one of the greatest exports that we have, not just from LA and Hollywood, but nationwide, was our entertainment industry. Look at the aerospace industry, the shipyard, and our port. Many would call it the blue-collar economic backbone of the region. And somehow we have allowed this decade of decline to set in. And it is my refusal to sit idly by and let this decade of decline continue that forced me to enter the mayor's race. Now, I want to go through briefly, I know, and you guys need to flag me when I get to my time, Michael. You know, you think having I've been on the air now almost a decade, we keep track in minutes and seconds, but in this environment, I never can keep track of my time very well. But there are some shocking things about LA that I never thought that I would be repeating. Since December 2007, we have lost, according to the LA Business Journal, 400,000 jobs. Since December 2007 for LA County. The lion's share of those jobs have left the city of Los Angeles. We must make Los Angeles somewhere that companies of all sizes want to work. Now, our answer to this from city government to bring jobs back to LA? Our answer has recently been these business tax holidays. Now, people that know me, that know my background would think, business tax holiday, lowering the tax burden, that sounds great. It doesn't work. When you put in a business tax holiday for new businesses, it's great for new businesses to come to LA. They get a 3-year tax holiday of our business tax, and they get a big discount on their DWP bill for a number of years. Now that's attractive. And they have 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 examples that they'll use in the media to say they've created jobs. Now, you bring 6, 7, 8, 9 companies here, we've lost 400,000 jobs. When you lower the business tax burden with a business tax holiday on new businesses, what are you doing for the existing businesses that are here? You're punishing them. The existing business, no matter what size, it could be a 3-man automotive shop. It can be a florist owned by a family. Or it could be a big car dealership. Either way, you're penalizing the existing business here. The business that's been with us. The business that's been loyal. And what's going to happen at the end of 3 years of that business tax holiday if it happens to be a business that can easily move? We might never see the benefit really of having that business in our community. And number 2 on my priorities, tonight anyway, about 6 priorities, I'm going to go through them real quick. Number 2 is ending corruption. But these two go together in what I want to mention to you. In the city of Los Angeles, we have a circumstance where in the last 2 months, we had $1 million in federal grant money that the city had control over that was earmarked. You may have read this story in the LA Times. $1 million that was earmarked for Skid Row. Now, in my background, in my years in Los Angeles, I spent a number of years on the board of directors of AIDS Project Los Angeles. I was the chairman of AIDS Project Los Angeles for a number of years. And one of our most needed programs was a housing program where we would provide housing assistance and help find housing for our clients who were suffering through AIDS, obviously a tumultuous time, a tragic time in their lives. And seeing that firsthand, knowing what that challenge is, I couldn't believe that our city took, and they weren't embarrassed about it, they took $1 million of taxpayer funds that was earmarked for Skid Row, and they gave it to Gensler Architecture Firm, one of the richest architecture firms in the world, that happened to have gotten the Farmers Field deal for designing the football stadium, so they can decorate their offices. Now, with all due respect to Gensler, I do not fault them for their incredible success. They do amazing work, and they're great to have in the city of LA, but they can afford to decorate their own offices. And you know what? Gensler would decorate their own offices. Let me tell you something else, real quick. I've got 2 minutes. Something that just makes me crazy about the Community Redevelopment Agency. They gave $52 million to Eli Broad to build a parking garage in downtown LA. All right, to go with his art museum. Now, Eli Broad is the richest man in the city, multi-billionaire. He does great things for the city. He's a huge philanthropist. But I know Eli Broad values his name. He would spend $52 million himself for the parking garage.
That's right.
They don't need taxpayer money for that.
That's right.
Real quick. All right, I told you, priority number 1 is making the city more workable for businesses of all sizes, small, medium, large. All right, number 2, we've got to balance the budget with long-term solutions and not short-term gimmicks. Number 3, with me and my mayoral administration, we will spend infrastructure money on infrastructure problems. all right? They take $300 million a year from the DWP budget every year and call it a surplus, all right? And then they tell us we need $20 billion for infrastructure money. Well, if they've been taking $300 million a year every year, it was a surplus, why didn't we spend it on the infrastructure to begin with? Point number 4, we absolutely have to do something about public education. As the mayor, I do not have any jurisdiction over the schools, but you got the power of the bully pulpit, all right? And it's now an economic issue. How can we attract businesses and keep businesses in our community for jobs when we don't have a public school system that the employees of those companies are comfortable putting their kids in? Number 5, we must end corruption. People that know me, I'm the only prosecutor, former prosecutor. I was a federal prosecutor here in LA for a number of years. The only prosecutor in the field, had experience in rooting out corruption. And let me tell you something, people say, well, Kevin, you're not going to be a prosecutor. You can't take people out in handcuffs and indict them if you're the mayor. You know what you have to do? All you have to do in a public environment for a city to end the corruption is expose it.
Right.
And what happened with the gold card desk? The fixed ticket parking setup they had in City Hall? The moment it got exposed, the mayor ended it the next day. So you don't have to carry people out, you just have to expose it. Michael McCue will tell you that out of this field of mayoral candidates, I will expose it. Right, I did it on the air, we'll do it from the mayor's office. Point number 6, and I brought my op-ed so I won't go through it. I really think that it's a good government issue. I think that the Los Angeles City Council should be transformed to a part-time city council. Not a part-time government, all right? It's a big city, we have a lot of work to do, and not part-time staffs. But the electeds need to be part-time officials. And all the reasons there, and the reason why it's good government, so that we have more candidates to run for office, if it were part-time, is in that op-ed. And it's not like it's anything strange, like it's a weird idea or anything. We have 88 cities in LA County, 87 of them, including Long Beach, have a part-time city council. 6 of the top 10 cities in America have part-time city councils. With that, my website, Kevin James for Mayor. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for being here.
Hello, everyone. How are y'all doing? My name is Derek Iverson. I am one of the Green Party spokespersons for the state of California. And I want to make this really quick because I know we're running short on time, and I want to give the maximum amount of time I can to our candidate for president, who is here, and it is my great privilege to introduce her. One thing real quick, this place thrives on you getting drinks at their bar, so I want to encourage your alcoholism at this time. If you feel like maybe you want to have a beer or a gin and tonic or a bourbon with some Coke, it's over there. And they'll love you for it. Okay, that said, I want to introduce someone who has much better medical advice than that. Jill Stein is a Green Party candidate for President of the United States, and we are very honored to have her here with us tonight. She is a doctor by trade. However, in her time as a doctor, she realized that she was treating a lot of symptoms, and she wanted to swim upstream to treat the bigger problems that we face in this country, and that's why she decided she had to get involved in public life, and it is our privilege to have her involved, and I hope that she can write our country a great prescription, and I sure hope we can read her handwriting. I'd like to welcome Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, and thanks very much to Jeff Bacon and Michael McCue for organizing this tonight. And yes, let's hear it for them. And thanks to all of you, to the speakers here tonight talking about the really important work they're doing. And thanks to all of you here who've come and who've done so much to help us really start occupying the future right now, because that is what we're doing, and that's very much, I think, the incredible excitement that you bring here tonight, but it's also the staggering, breathtaking opportunity, the moment that we're in. We're in this incredible breakthrough moment, a historic moment, really, where democracy and justice are rising up all over, all around us. And going back to the student strikes in Europe over the last couple of years, the democracy revolutions in the Middle East, the uprisings in Madison, Wisconsin, and then the Occupy movement, which has broken out all over, we are in a truly amazing time. And add to that, we're also at a time when the economy and a whole lot of other things are really hitting the wall, and people are starting to pull away from politics as usual, and are really starting to question, where are we politically, and maybe the ruling political parties that have gotten us here are not going to be the way that we're going to get out of it. Maybe we have to really change all of this. So at this particular moment, we're also now coming into election season. And you put it all together, and it's really a perfect storm for real change and for using this election to actually start taking our democracy back, so we can do the kinds of things that you've been talking about here tonight, for which there's enormous public need and enormous public support, if only we had a democracy to get us there. And I say this really as a medical doctor, a disgruntled medical doctor, who really felt, what shall we say, at a loss for what to do within a very broken medical system that was not meeting the very urgent needs of people who come to it. Some people's, yes, but lots of people's no. And also in a broader setting where there's only so much you can do as a medical doctor, basically pushing pills and medical procedures and turning people back out into the broader world that is making them sick to start with, between the air pollution, the sick food system, the sick transportation system, poverty, stress, inequality. We know what the drivers of this epidemic of chronic disease is, and these are new diseases, particularly as they come down the age spectrum. And I was watching as a mother, watching both in a college health clinic, but also my children's cohort, seeing these diseases, the skyrocketing rates of asthma and obesity and cancer and learning disabilities and autism and diabetes, things that did not used to be diseases of children and that now are. It was clear that something is going on here. Our genes are not changing overnight, and yet as a medical doctor, we're just giving people pills and turning them back out to what was making them sick. And I then went to work to try to educate our elected officials, thinking, well, if only they knew that we could prevent so much of this, if only they knew that mother's milk was now contaminated with what's coming out of our incinerators. We don't need those incinerators. Instead, we can actually just recycle and reuse and reduce and create a lot of jobs while we're doing it. We've got these win-win solutions. Surely our legislators will understand and they will do something. So that was my political education. So when people ask me what kind of medicine I practice now, I say I practice political medicine, because that's where the problem really is. If we can fix our sick political system, we can start fixing not only our broken health care, but our broken economy and our broken environment and our broken housing and education systems and all the rest. As part of my political education, I discovered the power of money and lobbyists to prevent the public interest from achieving what it's rightly due, and what we really have the democracy to achieve if only we had a democratic government, because we know large majorities support just about 90% of these things that we're talking about. And what I found was that the money thwarts us over and over again. So I thought, well, gee, let's get the money out of politics, like Michael McCue was saying earlier tonight with the Disclose and the related projects. Let's get the money out. In Massachusetts, we actually did the work. We put the referendum on the ballot. It won by a 2-to-1 margin. We thought, oh, great, our problems are solved. But you know what? The legislature repealed it the very next year because they didn't want to have electoral competition. And that said to me that if we really want to change things, we can't just ask. It's not enough to work through the broken political system. We actually have to throw the bums out, and we need to become the political system. So that's the moment that we're in, and the Occupy movement, I think, has really broken the sound barrier. How did they do it? With a human microphone. They were told, no, you can't speak, you can't use an amplification system, so they created one out of people. And what did they do? They amplified not just our voices, but with the human microphone, they amplified our humanity. And they have basically put on the agenda that we need to take back our personhood from corporations who stole it. And we need to stop corporate personhood and restore human personhood. So we are at this incredible historic moment now when it's as if the stars are all lining up now, as Mike Farrell was talking about, for getting rid of the death penalty. The stars are really lining up in all kinds of ways for taking our democracy back. And one of those things is that the needs have never been greater and have never been more pressing than they are right now. That we're really facing a set of converging crises really, that are all kind of hitting the wall right now. In our economy, in our environment, in basic human rights, the right to education and health care and housing, and in the endlessly expanding war. And so what the two parties have given us, not just the Republicans, but the Democrats as well, there's been a bilateral, bipartisan collaboration. And what have they given us? Massive bailouts for Wall Street, and the Obama administration was very much a part of that, brought in Larry Summers and Tim Geithner and, wall-to-wall Wall Street inside the White House. So both of them have given us these bailouts for Wall Street, the layoffs for Main Street, the attacks on Medicare and Social Security, declining workers' wages, the expanding war, and I might just comment, one of President Obama's first actions was to up the drone war in Pakistan. And the withdrawal from Iraq, in fact, was a timetable already set by George Bush. And it was the failure of the Obama administration to extend the stay of our soldiers and to have them granted immunity. He couldn't achieve that, so he had to bring them out. But he's not really bringing them home. Some of them will come home, but the troops are just moving to Kuwait. They're not coming home, they're just getting ready for the next battle. And meanwhile, we've begun these drone proxy wars in so many countries, including also Yemen and Somalia. And we now have opened a new front in the war for oil in Central Africa, now that oil has been discovered in Uganda and Central Africa. For the first time, we are sending troops. That's another piece of what the bipartisan collaboration has brought us. As well, the privatization of education, skyrocketing costs of higher education, the dismantling of our civil liberties, which we are seeing at the Occupy sites, with the militarization of our police forces and the very brutal suppression of our free speech rights. Not only free speech, free assembly, and the rights to a free press, those rights, our basic American rights, are really being drastically threatened. And all hats off to the occupiers for standing up for all of us and our basic American rights. Likewise, the powers that be have brought us the plundering of the environment, the rollback of racial justice. It used to be that an African American family had 10 cents to every dollar of wealth that a white family had. But in the last 10 years, that 10 cents has declined to 5 cents. We are not going in the right direction, and we need to change that. Likewise with our environment, and we're seeing now in Durban, South Africa, that, you know, they are just giving up, essentially. And even when we had both houses of Congress that were Democratic and a Democratic president, we could not pass even the most moderate of environmental bills. That says to me, we do not have the leadership on Capitol Hill that we need, and we intend to get that back in this election. Now, that was the bad news, but the good news is that people are standing up like we haven't seen in generations, and they are providing the leadership. The people in this room are providing the leadership. The Green Party in particular is providing the leadership that we haven't seen, and that's not coming from the political elite. And we are going to provide that. And people know that we need leaders in Washington who refuse to be bought by lobbyist money, and for whom change is not just a slogan to trot out in an election year. So all of that is why I'm running, and believe me, I had no intention to run. I've been mostly a grassroots democracy, state-focused person, but when the debt ceiling debacle hit in last spring, in April, May, and June, and our Democratic leaders began to put Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid on the table, it seemed just unconscionable that we were going to allow this election to go by and not have a voice of opposition. So we're not going to let that happen. There is a movement that is alive and well, and you are part of it, and you have made it happen for democracy and justice and for the 99%. And we're going to ensure that we have a choice. When we walk into that voting booth, we don't have to be confronted simply with a Republican version of the Wall Street future and a slightly less harsh, but only slightly, Democratic version of the Wall Street future. You don't have to cast a vote that will provide a mandate for 4 more years of what we've been getting. We can have a choice for democracy and justice on that. And I want to just quickly mention, silence. We're told to silence ourselves. We're told we can't afford because there might be unintended consequences of actually engaging our democracy and standing up for what we are and what we're about and what we believe in. How can we put that on the ballot? Something bad might happen. We have a lot to be afraid of. But the truth is, silence is a failed strategy. It is a failed political strategy. And the politics of fear that we have been told to practice has brought us what? It's brought us everything that we have been afraid of. The expanding wars, the unraveling climate, the declining economy. All of those things have resulted from even what we thought was the most progressive president that we could ever allow, but we didn't change the system. And that is why I'm running with the Green Party, an independent, third, non-corporate party which does not accept corporate campaign contributions. So when we are elected to office, you don't have to worry. We do not have another secret master who we actually have to serve. We will serve no one but you, the people, and you, the voters. You can be sure of that. Whether we are 2% of the vote or whether we are 52% of the vote, we win by reviving our democracy, which is on life support. We need to re-engage that democracy and revive it and breathe life into it. And we do that by standing up for who we are and how we are going to move forward. Democracy needs a moral compass. You cannot leave your values at home outside of the voting booth. You've got to bring those values into the voting booth to guide our way forward. We do need voting reform so that we don't have unintended consequences, so you don't have a split vote. And by the way, there may be 2 or 3 versions of the Republican Party that are on the ballot. So the vote for business as usual may actually be split, also because American Select, which you may have heard about, appears to be a mostly, shall we say, libertarian Republican enterprise, which is not straightforward, not democratic, not transparent, etc., and appears to be providing an insurance policy for some Republican candidates. So there may be more than one Republican, there may be 2 Republicans, and that is if you don't count the Democrat as a Republican. So there may be 2 or 3 that are splitting the business as usual vote. This may be a vote which would be won in a 4-way race by 26%. So we may not even have to get to 52%. But, this is my 5th race. And in my opinion, we have run every race. We have won every race that I've had the honor of running, because we have advanced our democracy. We have changed the concept of what alternative politics is about, and we have held corporate politics accountable and really changed the agenda. So in my view, we win, whether we are 52% or 2%. If we are politically silent, we lose no matter what. Corporate politics, even if there are 2 or 3 corporate politicians on the ballot, that does not a democracy make. We make it a democracy by being a part of it, and we make it a democracy by organizing millions of voters, not only to stand up in this election, but to continue standing up and working together for the long haul and really beginning to build, starting in this race, for the future. I'll just mention very quickly what our issues are. Many of them have been covered tonight. They are a Green New Deal. Like the New Deal that helped us out of the Depression in the 1930s, we need a New Deal now. Not simply 2 million jobs, we need 25 million jobs. We need to put an end to the recession, an end to unemployment. We can do all of that with a real emergency jobs creation program. And the beauty is, at the same time, we can also put an end to our role in climate change, which is a predominant role in climate change, and we can set the bar for the nations around the world to really start together, truly putting an end to climate change. And we can do that by specifically creating the jobs in the areas of the new green economy. And that means that we're creating jobs in clean manufacturing, in local, organic, and sustainable agriculture, in public transportation, and clean renewable energy, which also gets us real national security and makes wars for oil obsolete. a human right. Its time has come. As the most prosperous of all nations, it's time for us to join the community of nations and ensure that every American has health care as a human right through Medicare for All system. We can do that now. At the same time, we restore choice. We restore consumer choice for who is your doctor and what hospital you're going to go to. And at the same time, we can save an enormous amount of money and really begin to draw down on the national debt simply by moving to a healthcare system that consolidates the 30% we're spending right now. 30% goes down to about 2% of the overhead. So we save a lot of money. We stop this skyrocketing healthcare inflation. It's a win-win all around. It's time for it. We bring the troops home. We downsize the military. Put that money back into our urgent needs here at home, into our schools, healthcare, housing. Fifth, if we bailed out the banks who caused the problem, who crashed the economy, it's time to bail out our students who are really the economy of the future. And we do that in two ways. We want to basically forgive student loan debt. We can do it. We came up with $16 trillion for the banks. We can come up with $1 trillion for our students. And we make public higher education free so that students have a right and can easily access public higher education. It's a necessity in the 21st century as much as a high school degree was in the 20th. It's time to provide it. And finally, we can provide a welcoming path to citizenship for the immigrants who have provided so much enrichment to our culture and who are an integrated and key part of our economy. Enough of immigrant bashing. It's time to respect the immigrants who represent all of our roots. We are all immigrants in this nation. And to truly fix the problem, because dislocations of large populations are a very difficult thing, especially for people who are forced to migrate because they no longer have jobs, and for communities who must receive large influxes quickly. This is not a healthy thing. We need to go back to NAFTA, which was the source of so-called undocumented immigrants. Why did they come? Because they had lost their jobs, because American food systems began dumping cheap goods into the economies south of the border and put basically Latin American farmers out of business. So this is wrong from the get-go, and we need to fix NAFTA and the other free trade agreements to stabilize those economies. So finally, I'll just wrap up saying that I'm not just asking for your vote. I'm asking for your leadership, because this is about restoring grassroots democracy. That's where this begins, and this election is the beginning. Whether we win 2% of the vote or 52%, whether we continue fighting from our communities or we continue fighting with a president who is actually the organizer-in-chief, we keep moving forward. And it will take all of us. Even if we were to win the White House, we would still have a very active campaign on our hands. We would still have to deal with the rest of a political system and Congress that is still run by lobbyists and big money. But the answer to that is an organized and informed and empowered citizenry and democracy. And that's what we can do, whether we're in the White House or getting to the White House, or in our governorships, or in our houses of assembly, in our legislatures, in our city councils, in all of that. It's time for us in this election to begin standing up for who we are and the democracy we can be, and to start taking that democracy back and building the peaceful, just, secure, green future that we deserve and is within our reach right now. So let's make it happen. Thank you so much.
Does she have your vote? Yeah, I like to hear that. That was the immediate response. I mean, I have to tell you, I am Jill Stein's campaign manager of Ben Mansky. I'm from Wisconsin, and she certainly had my vote. But there's something else about Jill as a candidate that I think we need to be thinking about tonight. You know, people like me and people like you have been making a choice in the past month since Jill announced for the presidency to get on board with this campaign. And we have done that for some of the reasons that she has already stated. That this is a year of opportunity for the democracy movement and for independent politics, unlike anything we've seen in over a decade. It's quite an opportunity. But there's another reason that she didn't share with you about why so many people are signing up on this campaign. And that is two words: Jill Stein. Jill Stein as a candidate. We are so lucky. We are so lucky to have a woman who can bring this kind of passion and this kind of expertise and this ability to speak truth to power, and who comes out of our ranks. She's a Green Party candidate, and because she is running, the Green Party is united, as it has not been in a very long time. People who have been in different sections of the party, people who have not seen eye to eye, are coming together for Jill Stein's campaign. And I'm going to make an appeal to you. I'm making this appeal to you right now. You have in your hands an envelope. You have in your hands a form. This is our first united Green Party, homegrown candidate in the history of the Green Party of the United States. And she is not going to be getting funding from Ciba Geigy, or from ExxonMobil, or from Coca-Cola, or any multinational corporation you can name them. But she is a creation of the movement that we are all a part of. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, people came in tonight, and everybody contributed, and that made this event possible. That made this room possible. That made the excellent food possible. I really enjoyed that egg salad sandwich. It was over there. It was one of the best egg salad sandwiches I've had in a long time, and I'm an expert. But what we need to do is we need to make this campaign grow. And we need to make it possible for you to go to everybody you know and to ask them to give, and then to give again. And the way you do that is by giving again tonight, so that you have credibility. So you can go to people and say, hey, I've given everything I could possibly give. It made me happy to make that donation. So that's my ask for you. And I know there's some green hats here.
Green cans.
Green cans, all right. So these will be circulating. We're about to go to the question and answer, because I know people want to talk to Jill. They don't want to hear from me anymore. But these are going to be going around, so please make your contribution, write out a check, the most that you can possibly give tonight. She's not going to be back for a while. You want her to come back to California, right? I want 10 times as many people once they've seen her on MSNBC, right? Excellent. So thank you for your contribution, and I'm going to turn it back to Jill to have a little discussion with you. Thank you for running.
Thank you, Ben. And by the way, for those who are here for Move to Amend, you may be interested to know that Ben Mansky is actually one of the key founders, along with David Cobb, of Move to Amend. So let's hear it for Ben. And that is where our social movement, and our legal movement, and our constitutional movement, and our electoral movement converge. And that is what's so very exciting about this moment, is that we all are doing the work, and we're all coming together for that synergy that we get by ensuring that we are using every tool available to us to really make the change that we need. So I'm going to come down here, if that's okay, just because it feels kind of crazy to be way up there. And let me just open the floor for comments, questions. We won't take too long because the night is moving on, but just to give you a chance to, you know, put your 2 cents in and ask questions if you have it, or give us your comments, your thoughts, etc. Don't be shy. Yeah.
I'll give you one too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, okay, so the question is about a state bank. Laura Wells, who was the Green Party candidate for California governor, talked a lot about a state bank, which is a wonderful idea, and it's really a no-brainer. And a state bank makes it possible to actually get money and credit and support into the hands of a lot of people without having to pay high interest rates, ensures that the money keeps flowing because the banks don't let it flow even when they have oodles of it. A state bank is truly there to serve people and the local economy, and to fund, to provide a source of funding for that green transition that we badly need. So yes, it's a no-brainer. Thank you. Questions? Yeah.
Yes, I'm Shane TV. The platform code coordinator for Green Party platform.
Wonderful.
To ask you, and see on your face. What are your views on marriage for all who want it?
On what?
What are your views on marriage for all who want it?
Oh, yes.
And 2, what's your take on how to sell the Israeli outside?
Great, okay. One of those is very, very easy and quick. The other one is quite complicated. And yes, I'm proud to say that I live in the state which was the first to provide marriage equality for all citizens in Massachusetts. I'm also proud to say that I was the first candidate for governor who actually took that stand, that full marriage rights should be provided to everyone. And I did that when other candidates were debating, this was back in 2002, and other candidates were just debating whether civil unions were worth supporting. I took a stand on equal marriage. So you can be sure I'm there, I'm not turning back, I've been there a long time. On the Arab-Israeli problem, I come to this with members of my own family who are on both sides of the divide, and I know what an impassioned issue this is. And I would also say I understand the historic and current traumas, psychological and cultural traumas that have helped create the gridlock here that we're in. But having said that, I clearly feel that, and I know that, we must use international law and human rights to move forward, and that the Israeli government needs to end the occupation of the occupied territories, needs to end the apartheid within Israel for Arab citizens and non-Jewish citizens, and that the United States needs to do its part to really clarify it's not okay for Israel to continue to act in a way that really defies human rights and international law. So the United States needs to be very clear about that. And I think, you know, it's, there's no way that Israel is going to do the right thing until the United States also starts doing the right thing. So we got to put our money where our mouth is. Yes?
Make sure that all these meat growers, the factory farmers, don't get these big grants anymore. It only makes people obese, sick, diabetic, Alzheimer. It keeps on going. And plant food is where it is. And we need to change this whole attitude of meat eating.
because there are a couple of issues there. Thank you so much. And I speak to that as a vegetarian myself. As someone who's certainly sympathetic with the issues of humane treatment of animals. But I'll also say that factory farming transcends all of that. It violates our labor issues, it violates our environment, it is bad for our economy, it is bad all around. And I strongly agree that we need to move away from factory farming as quickly as we can. And actually, as a medical doctor, there is a lot of truth to this, that largely plant-based diet, and I don't tell people that they have to be vegetarian. There are ways to be very healthy eating meat, but it's undeniable that a largely plant-based diet is very good for people, and it's very good for the planet as well, and for the environment. And it is also true that in being humane to animals, that by ensuring that we have pasture-fed and grazed and not confined animals, you actually produce a much healthier food system. And if anybody wants to know the nutritional details of all that, I could take hours to talk to you about it. I actually co-authored a book called Environmental Threats to Healthy Aging, published by Physicians for Social Responsibility. It's on the web. If you Google it, you can download all 200 pages, which actually talks about why what's bad for the environment is also really bad for our health. And that again gets back to this win-win by doing the right thing for our environment and for our economy, by the way, and growing local, small-scale economies, including local farmers, local organic farmers, and that does not include factory farming. Mike, by making that transition, it's a win-win all around. I couldn't agree with you more.
Make a senator for the animals.
Maybe time for one more.
Okay, one more, you've got, yeah.
All right, I'm curious as to your stance on the war on drugs and any major policy changes you would initiate.
Great, yes, definitely. So one of our key policy positions, and I don't know, Ben, did we have flyers tonight?
I think we're out.
We're totally out? Okay, sorry about that. Well, if you go to our website, you'll see, it's on our flyer, another one of our key positions is that we support legalization of marijuana, which has implications really across the board, much larger than just marijuana, because marijuana is basically the workhorse of the illegal drug trade. So by legalizing marijuana, you basically pull the rug out from under the entire illegal drug trade and all the violence surrounding it. So, as a medical doctor, I know that marijuana is a dangerous drug because it is illegal. It's not illegal because it's dangerous. So we need to act on that, and in doing so, we can address what is truly the biggest health threat of marijuana, which is the violent drug underground economy that surrounds it. So, not to mention the explosion of our incarceration system, which is an abomination and which is basically a factory for creating true hardened criminals. And it is just inexcusable and unacceptable that nonviolent drug offenders are being sent to prison. If, first of all, marijuana should not be illegal to start with, but beyond that, other drug problems should be treated as mental health problems and truly treated, and not simply incarcerated and sent to jail, to ensure that they will have a bad history, a bad future going forward. So yeah, absolutely, we can downsize the prisons, discharge a lot of the inmates, and stop this explosion of incarceration by ending the war on drugs. Yeah. So thank you all so much. My website is just my name. It's on the envelopes that you got, so it's just jillstein.org. And I'm really serious in saying it's not just your vote I want. It's really your leadership, because it's all of us together that will win this. and that is going to be essential to winning any of the other things that we talked about here tonight. If we actually want to achieve them, we need a democracy in order to do it. If we get our democracy back and insist that we are going to take our electoral system back, all of this just flows naturally from that. So whatever your issue is, if you also work to rebuild our democracy through our electoral system and also through the one political party that is not corporate funded, that's independent, that is of, by, and for the people, this is truly how we win it, and we can build that for the long haul through this campaign. So join the team and welcome aboard.
And thank you to Michael and to Jeff. I realize that we chased them up, but they're at the door. You can make your contribution on the way out. I want to really thank you all for coming out. And have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.